Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 269th episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. And of course, as it's the end of the year, we are doing a year in review. Don't forget, the podcast is now fortnightly, but if you're missing weekly content, you have 5 years worth of work to reflect back on. And if you want my handy guide that lists the episodes with a clickable link, you can get it at bit.ly/DMPG23. As I said, the end of the Gregorian calendar is often a useful time for reflection. It's an opportunity to look back and set the tone for the year ahead. I think it's a useful exercise to celebrate all that we might have achieved and consider what we want to build on. And this year has been my 7th full year of business. And I have to say, it's been an incredibly bumpy ride, which I didn't expect. People usually say, oh, it's the first 3 years of business that are the toughest. And actually, I found the last 2 really, really challenging. At the start of the year, as you know, I pick a word to set the tone for the year ahead. And the word for this year, for 2024, was magical. Now, while I would love to say I found myself with special magical powers, being able to cast spells or wave a magic wand and for things to go my way, surprise, surprise, that wasn't the case. But the reason I chose this word is that it was more about finding small magical moments every day, stemming from 100 Happy Days. And if you want to hear more about that, the exercise and how I found it, check out episode 186, and that's the International Day of Happiness. So this year, as for most people, was filled with huge challenges, including for me, water pouring into the walls of my house from heavy rain. I'm laughing now. It really wasn't funny at the time, especially, I think as a result of climate chaos in my eyes, the incredibly wet weather we've had, and thinking of citizens across the country who've had their homes and their shops and their business premises flooded several times. So I think what I experienced was minor, but of course, when you're in it, it feels incredibly stressful. Juggling lots of things and only being able to have 7 days off this year. So I've had 7 days off, including 1 weekend off where I didn't do any cleaning or cooking or chores. So 1 weekend and then 5 working days. So I really hope you're enjoying the content of this podcast and want to keep up to date. If you do, then why not join my newsletter? When you join, you'll receive a free copy of my white paper on inclusive language and mental health. And that link is bit.ly/ILMHCK. Okay, so what actually happened this year? So if we start from January, some of you might know, some of you might not have known, is that I took a 2-day-a-week job. Now, if you listen to the podcast episode at the end of 2022, when I was talking about 2023, I talked about the Hatch Accelerator Program. So Hatch Enterprise, and I went on an accelerator program in 2023, and then I saw a job advertised and I applied for it in November 23. So the accelerator program ran from January 23 to June 23, then got the newsletter, saw a job advertised 2 days a week for a fixed term years contract. I applied for it and I got it. And the job is because I'm nearly finished. I've not quite finished it yet, but it's all about convening a community of practice within the social enterprise sector. So it was for social enterprise practitioners as opposed to founders or new business owners that these organizations serve. And it was very interesting. It's been very interesting. So 2 days a week, I thought, okay, that will be fine. But it's amazing how 2 days a week really eats into your time. So of course, as a result of that, I haven't been able probably to do as many things as I would like to have done for the business. Don't regret it. I've had some brilliant colleagues. It's a very interesting place to work. But actually, the social enterprise sector has been a bit of a shock in terms of lack of professionalism, people not responding to emails, the most absurd and self-important out of offices I have ever seen in my life, sort of telling me that people are playing and doing really important things or not answering emails at the moment because they're in the chrysalis phase of their business or organization. It just incredible out of offices. I'm like, wow, maybe I should take a leaf out of this book here because this is really interesting. And I think it also goes to show that when you have worked for yourself for a long time, and I mean, I guess 7 years isn't that long, but for a significant amount of time, whatever's significant for you, it is quite difficult to go back into an organization and kind of emails that you receive that you have to receive about policies, procedures, expenses, processes. It just feels like, oh gosh, it does feel a bit schooly, even though that's not the intention. I also started this year by reading My Year of Magical Thinking, to go with my word, magical, by Joan Didion, the American journalist. Now, very interesting book. It is absolutely not what I thought it was going to be. And in fact, another friend was reading it and she said, I gave up on it because I couldn't read it all. Interesting. I don't think I would read it again. And in fact, I wouldn't really recommend the book. I mean, it is an amazing insight into incredible grief because she lost her husband very suddenly one night. And then, but actually, what was going on is her daughter was very, very sick. And then she came home from visit to the hospital. Like her daughter was extremely sick on the brink of death. Her daughter survived for a bit longer, but she did pass away, not in the period of the book, sort of after that. And then they came home and he passed away from a heart attack at the same time. So it is incredible what she had to deal with. But some of it just feels so disconnected. And I wonder whether that's kind of a reflection of her culture and her upbringing and the way she managed things. But yeah, interesting. It was not the book I thought it was going to be. I thought actually it would be a bit more like Enchantment or Wintering. That listeners, if you've listened to the podcast episodes, I did a book review by Catherine May, her book Wintering, and I read Enchanted this year as well. Wasn't like that at all. But anyway, really, really interesting. The theme for the podcast for January was kicked off with heart and mind connection. So we had some really great episodes. Episode 228 with Rolake Ojo, episode 229 coaching with collage with Andrea Watts, and I trained with her. So actually in February, I finished my coaching for collage training. And episode 230 with Magdalena Bachmeier, who has written lots on heart and mind connection and is the best-selling author of The Grid. February was, I guess, all about getting used to and transitioning to working in a job and running a business. And it really did take me longer than I expected. And the theme for the podcast was white dominant norms. Episodes 232 to 235 touch on that topic in different ways. March, of course, is always International Women's Month and really busy for that. And I did a number of talks. And one keynote that I did was about stop stereotyping Asian women for International Women's Day. And there is, of course, a podcast of the same title. And the podcast theme for March 2024 was Inspiring Inclusion, the same as the International Women's Day theme. And those are episodes 236 to 239. In April, I was able to take my scholarship-funded place on Tara Moore's coaching course. Really interesting. She's based in Pacific Time, USA, so in California. So kind of late night calls, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. But working with people across the globe. So really interesting. And I was part of the AHUA, so Association of Heads of University Administration Spring Conference, chairing members that took part in the Race Reciprocal Mentoring Program. And so that was really great to showcase that program, to hear from the participants, the white mentors and the global majority mentors cross-institutionally that took part in the program. And you can check out my blog all about setting up a race reciprocal mentoring program, and also the podcast episode about reciprocity in a mentoring relationship. The theme for the podcast for April was decolonizing what it is in the workplace, curriculum and arts and heritage, spread across episodes 240 to 244. In May, we saw the kickoff of the White Rose University Consortium Equity and Leadership Program, which was a global majority leadership program. Absolutely phenomenal. Really, really delighted to have been able to facilitate that. And I also did some work for NCAT, National Centre for Accessible Transport, thanks to the wonderful Bridget Seeley as an associate with her. And the theme for the podcast was psychological safety and having mental health conversations. There's episodes 245 to 248. And it was the first time I was able to have a weekend away this year. In June, I delivered sessions on mental health first aid sessions at Imperial, and went to Essex University to deliver Train the program for race equity. And the work that I do, writing, kind of creative writing that I've been doing for 4 years, trying to cultivate creative writing, was published. 3 of my poems were published in the Women Speak volumes by the wonderful Shamila Beesmahan. And so I can put the link in the show notes. You can have a look. Some really amazing work from women across the UK. And the theme for the podcast was Why the Pushback, episodes 249 to 252. In July, I took part in Women in Leeds Network keynote, and there was the second session of the White Rose University Consortium leadership program. And I also had COVID for the second time. And I think that was probably from being at the Social Enterprise UK awards ceremony. And I hadn't been in a space with lots of people like that for a long time. So I think that's probably where I caught COVID. But although that was also my wedding, my one and only wedding for the year, which was a relative's wedding. So it could have been from there as well. And I rarely get to go to Asian weddings. So that was really, really lovely. And the theme for the podcast was election special and politics in the workplace, episodes 253 to 255. And then, of course, we have South Asian History Month, which spreads from July to August. So 17th of July to 17th of August, or actually it's 17th July to 18th August, episodes 256 to 259. In August, it was all about the South Asian Heritage Month talks. And also I got approached to work with an organization in Ireland to support them with their online course that they were doing on universal design. And then we had episode 260 in August, which celebrated 5 years of podcasting at the end of the month. Then in September, I went to deliver some work at University of Durham for their MBA course about cultural awareness, inclusion, working sensitively across cultures, because of course MBA students come from a variety of walks of life and countries. And it was very eye-opening because there were some incredible potential students there who had given up amazing jobs around the world to be there. So it's a very humbling actually experience. And the reason I was able to do that was because my wonderful friend, Professor David Johnson, who I know from my university course and my university days, who I had not seen in the flesh for 20 years, invited me to do that from seeing what I was doing on LinkedIn. So it's so lovely to connect with him and, see how amazingly he's done after all this time. And of course, it was 5 years of the podcast. And as a result, I decided to go fortnightly to give people a chance to catch up with 5 years worth of episodes. And the theme for that month was managing conflict and what do we do now after the fascist riots. There's episodes 261 and 262. October, of course, is incredibly busy because not only do we have Black History Month, but it's also World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October. And I was lucky to deliver a keynote at the Ceramics UK conference for World Mental Health Day, all about psychological risk assessments, what they are, how you can use them. And this is, when we talk about ceramics, we're not talking about the artistic potters, actually. We're talking about industrial ceramics, so tiles, brickworks, clay, so much more on the industrial side of it. So really interesting, not my usual people that I have an opportunity to meet or deliver to. And I also did some training for STEM ambassadors. So these are people who are volunteers that go into schools to talk about careers in STEM to encourage young people to get involved. And one really important event that I did attend in my personal space is I used to volunteer at an organization called Burley Lodge Centre, now called Better Leeds Communities, when I was a student. And the CEO there was Tara Kayani, and she had been in post for 20 years. And I was really privileged that she invited me to her leaving do and mentioned the podcast as well. So I'm so touched by that after 20 years of her amazing work and absolutely being an incredible role model to me as one of the very few South Asian women that we would see in senior roles at the time. So this was in 2000 to 2003. So wonderful to see her shining, wonderful to see her doing what she does and getting the accolade and praise that she absolutely deserves, because she really, really has been a beacon of light for me. And the theme for the podcast was understanding and recentering the white gaze, and that's episodes 264 to 265. I also came off Twitter, so that was great because it just becomes so toxic and I hadn't posted for a long time. So it's no longer follow me on Twitter, it is follow me on Blue Sky if you're on Blue Sky. And actually it makes you realize how I think when we come off social media platforms, we don't really miss them. Then in November, I did a session for Commerzbank on inclusive language. And I also was finally, after a really long time of wanting to do this, able to attend a Lego Serious Play session, which was brilliant as part of a business festival. So really interesting, actually quite similar to using collage as a coaching tool that I'm trained in, but obviously more 3D and using Lego and a slightly different debrief process from that. And the theme for the podcast was Gatekeepers at Work, episodes 266 to 267. And then in December, I attended the graduation of the wonderful delegates from the Equity and Leadership Programme for the White Rose Consortium. It was really wonderful to see senior leaders from across the 3 different institutions. So White Rose University Consortium comprises of University of Leeds, Sheffield and York. Really encouraging team members, their staff, and really having a celebration with the incredible staff members that I was able to work with. And I also delivered a team coaching session for a department at Imperial College around culture and inclusion and ways of working. And that's going to be part of a year-long project. And I was very, very lucky to be able to, just before delivering training, to see the Moguls exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum. And I highly recommend it, particularly if you're interested in South Asian history. I mean, it wasn't always easy if we think about the episodes that I did on decolonizing arts and heritage. And when you look at these incredible artifacts, how I would say about 80% of them are hosted either by the V&A, the British Library, Oxford, the Ashmolean and Cambridge universities. So that wasn't necessarily easy when you look at the information about things, but I feel very lucky to see them. And I do feel that, clearly in a way it's part of my heritage. And there was quite a lot about Gujarat in it, not only the fabrics, but bizarrely, I was thinking the other day how much I really love mother of pearl. And then I did not know this, that actually mother of pearl is very much a Gujarati thing. And it is from particular types of snails that are found in the Gulf of Kutch. So always, your heritage has a way of finding you. You will probably have heard me say that as well. And the theme for the podcast, there was just one podcast episode aside from this one, which is workplace wellbeing, enabling inclusion. And that's episode 268. And in terms of statistics, we have had 10% increase in listeners this year. So thank you so much to everyone who listens, encourages other people to listen and supports the work. And 78% of the listeners were new listeners across 38 countries, with the UK being the top country. No surprise, because this is very UK focused. So for 2025, I've decided that my word of the year is going to be nurtured. I would really like some nurturing and some support across the board for lots of different things, but let's see how it goes. But also to be nurtured by things that I've potentially planted, or nurtured by, maybe people that I'm going to meet in 2025. So I'd really, what I feel and I think is it's been an incredibly tough year for most people, and to recognize those facing genocide, war, hunger, and climate crisis caused primarily by the global north and wars. I don't think I faced anything near that, but it's also, so it's that balance. And this is not necessarily what I would say to someone who is experiencing hardship. But I think for me, this is from my perspective that I always try and hold on to. There are ways, and I do have support, and I do have it much easier living where I do in the global picture, and then trying to be part of the solution and not the problem. So this season and into 2025, I wish you much magic, nurturing, peace, and joy. I'd love to know the lessons that you've learnt this year. So please don't forget to message me, let me know. And don't forget, I run workshops, training sessions, and keynotes for organizations all about creating positive, happy, and equal workplaces. If you want to find out more, please get in touch with me at Layla, Leyla, at diverseminds.co.uk. I really hope you've enjoyed today's show. And if you have, why not leave me a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast from. And as always, if you do want to leave me a voice note anonymously or leave your name, you can do so via SpeakPipe. And that link is bit.ly/SPKPDMP. And finally, don't forget, you can watch my TEDx talk all about the connection between culture, race, and mental health. It's just 12 minutes long. And if you speed it up, it's even quicker. And that link is bit.ly/TEDx Wolves, WOLVESLO. So I hope that you have had the kind of year that you've wanted. As I said, I wish you kind of much ease and peace as we go forward. And don't forget to join me in 2 weeks' time, where I'll be talking about my predictions for workplace wellbeing in 2025. So take care, everyone. And until then, stay safe, and I hope to catch you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.